Hi all, today I'm handling topic 12 of public procurement, and topic 12 is about ethics in public procurement. So this topic is about ethics, ethical behavior. What is ethical in public procurement? What is unethical in public procurement? So we shall begin with an introduction to ethics. Of course, a definition of what ethics is. Importance of ethics in procurement and supply. Why is it important for you to behave ethically? Types of unethical practices in procurement and supply. And then debarment of bidders and contractors. There are some ethical issues which may lead to debarment of bidders and contractors. And then lastly, principles of procurement and supply chain. So basically this topic is about ethics, ethical behavior. How do you behave in procurement? So if I can define ethics, ethics are a set of morals, moral principles or values guiding our behavior. That is the definition of ethics. Moral or set of moral principles or values that guide our behavior. So it means ethics has got something to do with behavior, and it has got something to do with moral principles. There are people who have principles that help them survive maybe in a particular job environment. So ethics is just a group of principles that guide how people behave or guide the morals of people or how people behave. It guides the people's behavior. So in other simple terms, ethics is just what is good. How do you behave at workplace? When something comes up, when a rule is set, when a principle is put in place, how do you behave? How do you adopt to it? Do you take it positively or you take it negatively? That we can be able to tell if you are ethical or unethical. Of course, unethical is the opposite of ethical. If you behave positively towards something, you follow the rules, you're going about how positively on what you are supposed to do, then that is being ethical. And the opposite is true. Unethical behavior is on the negative extreme side, where things don't just go well with you. So there are several importance of ethics. One, it is for professional status. Any person in a particular profession, they're usually guided by ethical behavior. So you are told in this profession, this is how we behave. Like, for example, doctors have their own professional status and their own ethical behavior. How they're supposed to treat patients, how they're supposed to deal with patients, how they're supposed to behave before patients. All those are ethics. And every particular profession has its own ethical code of conduct. Apart from that, another benefit or importance of ethics is it helps you create long-term relationships and supply a goodwill. You've ever heard of suppliers saying, this company, yes, I can always supply for it because they behave well, they pay on time, they give you straightforward information, they do not trick you in doing things that you're not supposed to do. So that is ethics. It helps you establish a long-term relationship. Number 3, maybe another importance is if you are dealing with procurement, you're dealing with large sums of money. So ethics is just something that should come out naturally. So there has to be an ethical code of conduct to help people, because where there is money, there is usually a temptation of trying to diverge that money, trying to benefit yourself. So ethical code of conduct has to be there to be able to help you behave properly. And also it helps in creating organization reputation. Some organizations, we know them as ethical. The way they treat customers, the way they behave, the way they do things, they are just naturally ethical types of companies. And to also avoid forms of temptations to act unethically. Sometimes we are tempted to act unethically. But if you have the ethical code of conduct, then you will strive to act ethically. There are some factors that influence unethical behavior. So we've seen that unethical is on the negative extreme side. Ethical is on the positive side. So which factors make people to behave unethically? There are factors like inadequacy in laws or legislative compliance. The laws are there, but people want to bend the laws. That is what makes them act unethically. Failure to enforce professional codes of ethics. Every profession has its own codes of ethics. So if you ignore your professional code of ethics, then it means you will act unethically. Inadequate ethical education. If no one has taught you this is how we behave, this is how things are done, then you're likely to act unethically. Things like culture, the culture you come from or where you come from may make you act ethically or unethically. There are people whose culture just allows them to keep taking things which don't belong to them. So it means even when they go to workplaces, they may not be able to rest until they get something that does not belong to them. So that is the culture. Apart from that, the economic conditions may make people to behave unethically. Maybe now that the economy is so bad, people are really struggling to even get money, then you may find out you want to find a way of getting money in a way that is not right. That is unethical behavior. So apart from that, there are so many reasons that may make you act unethically, even if you are an ethical person. So you have to really consider the code of conduct to make sure you remain ethical no matter the circumstance. So apart from that, we shall look at what constitutes professional misconduct in your profession. And remember, this is the procurement profession. What is misconduct in procurement? There are very many misconducts. I can just mention 2 or 3. One is misappropriation of funds. Another one is buying or procuring goods at inflated prices. Number 3 is failure to keep proper records. Number 4 is disclosing of confidential information that you are not supposed to disclose. Engaging in activities which are contrary to those of the license and registration certificate. Dishonesty, corruption, fraud, practicing procurement as a practitioner without licenses. All that is professional misconduct. So you look at your profession, which is procurement, and try to see areas where if you go against that particular area, it will be called professional misconduct. All those, there are so many. From the time you start a procurement process up to the time you end, all those areas are good candidates where someone can behave, where someone can be able to conduct professional misconduct or not behave according to how you are supposed to behave. So there are some types of unethical practices in procurement. Unethical practices, I can mention few of them. Unethical practices is personal buying. In procurement, you are supposed to buy on behalf of organizations, institutions, but if you do personal buying, we have ever heard of these situations where someone buys things in procurement and then diverts them to their own projects. Someone is claiming they are buying building materials for particular construction, and then they divert those building materials to their own site. That is personal buying, and it is an ethical practice in procurement. Number 2, accepting suppliers' favors. Accepting suppliers' favors. When suppliers come and tell you, we shall come to your birthday, we shall buy you something, a car or so, you accept those favors. Because if you accept those favors, what will happen is you will give them something in return. Most suppliers, they don't give you favors just like that. They want something in return, especially they want a contract. So it means accepting suppliers' favor is unethical. There are some sharp practices. Sharp practices are those practices of misrepresentation. They are practices of playing games. You are not so straight. You keep lying, you keep giving false information so that you can be able to get advantage out of it. Those are sharp practices, and there are so many. Exaggeration, gaining information unfairly, sharing information with competitors, all those are sharp practices. unfair advantage of suppliers' financial situations, lying or misleading, all that. Another unethical behavior in procurement is misinformation, not giving the correct information, misinformation. The next one is conflict of interest, a very important part in procurement. Conflicting interest. Another one is unfair dealing, fraud, corruption. All those are unethical practices. Giving bribes, receiving of bribes, all of them are unethical in nature. So that is it. Measures to be taken to curb corruption. Corruption is one of the biggest unethical practice, but there are some measures you can put in place. Competitive bidding is one of the measures, ensuring that procurement is done in a competitive manner. Number 2, declaring conflicts of interest. In case you have a conflict of interest in any procurement, you should just declare it. Enforcement of rules. Procurement is full of rules, regulations. Make sure you follow them to the letter. It will prevent unethical behavior, especially corruption. Ensure there is public participation. Ensure the public is able to participate in procurement. Internal control mechanisms. Whistleblowing, training people, reducing political interference, engaging or introducing electronic procurement, and then due diligence. There are so many things you can do in procurement to just evade things like corruption, because corruption is one of the biggest unethical behavior. Proper evaluation of suppliers, establishing clear payment procedures, encouraging competition. All that is part of what you can be able to do to discourage unethical behavior. And then I said we shall look at debarment of bidders and contractors. Unethical behavior usually leads one to be debarred, to be prevented from entering into the contract with the procuring entity. So this debarment, a supplier or a contractor may be debarred, and once they're debarred, it means they are not supposed to participate in procurement contracts. And if you are debarred, if you are debarred if you've done any of these 5 offenses that I shall talk to you about. The first one, if you have committed an offense in the Public Procurement Disposal Act. If you have committed, number 2, if you have committed an offense related to any other act apart from the Public Procurement Act, like maybe the Constitution. If you've breached a contract for a procurement of a public entity, breaching of a contract leads to debarment. If you've given false information about your qualification, your capabilities, that one automatically leads you to debarment. If you refuse to enter into a written contract, you are supposed to be debarred. And if you breach the codes of ethics. Every profession has a code of ethics. So if you breach a code of ethics, you are debarred from participating in contracts of procurement. To move on, there are some principles of procurement. These are common principles: accountability, competition, consistency, effectiveness, value for money, fair dealings, integrity, transparency. All those are principles of public procurement. What public procurement professionals should be able to adhere to during their day-to-day activities in public procurement. So that is it. There are some best practices also in procurement. Best practices are things you can just try to incorporate in your business so that you can perform better, like effective internal communication, automation. Try to automate, make your systems automatic. They will sometimes help you to prevent unethical behavior. Transparency of work or how the work flows, establishing of alliances with suppliers. All those are best practices, economies of scale, etc. So just understand ethical behavior as good behavior, good practices in procurement setup, while unethical behavior are negative practices in procurement. So we have to strive to make sure we behave ethically rather than unethically. And this ethic question is usually so much considered in exam setting and even practically, because ethics is one of the areas that makes public procurement not to be very effective, because you'll find an ethical behavior is brought into procurement and then you lose a lot of money because people behaved in a way they were not meant to behave. So if you understand that, then professionally, you should be able to act ethically. So that is it for today's class.